launch conductor in mission control. We pause at this moment in our countdown to remember and honor the lives of each of the participants on the Celestis Memorial spaceflight. Their presence on this flight signifies a commitment to the opening of the space frontier shared by all of us. We wish the friends and families present today and all those who are with us in spirit all over the world Godspeed, good luck, and our thanks for allowing us to share this very personal time with you today. Elsie out. 5 vehicles armed, 3, 2, 1, fire. Missile away.
I'm used to saying good evening, ladies and gentlemen, but it's actually still afternoon in this part of the world, as well as the side of the country where we have our guests coming from. My name is Marc Lee, and welcome to our mission update for Celestis Memorial Spaceflights. It's what we do on a very frequent basis. There's really isn't anything planned unless we really have something to tell you. Well, obviously, we have something to tell you today. We have some incredible guests and members of this group that we're going to introduce you to shortly, but I like to make everyone aware, and there are a lot of you that are popping up online right now. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We do have a chat room. If there are any question at any time during the broadcast that you would like to ask, you can go ahead and kind of gear that up in your head and go ahead and paste it in the chat room, much like this. Hello, Sherry. How are you? Our Celestis crew, our head office is also online here as well, and they will be following up with what you will be hearing here during this broadcast. Not only that, if there's anyone that cannot see this live, if you have family members that are very, very interested in all the information we're going to be sharing with you this afternoon, this can be replayed over our YouTube channel, and I think as well as our Facebook page. So once the broadcast is over and you want to go ahead and email the link to someone, you can go ahead and do that. I would ask that if you could share, if you are on Facebook, if you're watching us from Facebook, if you could share this link on your page right now. We like to have a lot more people and family members to join us in this presentation. Well, we haven't been here in a while. In fact, I forget the last time that we were here, but I'm glad we've returned. And we have a lot of information to share with you. You do know of our group from our previous broadcasts and usually what it's all involved. Wow, there's a lot of you guys popping in right now. Good to see you. Without any further ado, the man that's been basically keeping us up to date with everything that's been going on is our guru and CEO, Mr. Charles Chafer. So, Charles, how are you, sir?
Hey, Mark. Great to see you after our summer hiatus.
Oh, yeah. After our burning, so I think we're on the surface of Mercury right now for this summer because I'm sweating.
Well, it's nice here in Santa Fe, so we balance things out. But really, it's great to be back, and it's great to have everybody with us. Really appreciate it. I see some well-known faces there in the chat room, and look forward to interacting with you all today. So today we're fortunate in that we have a very special guest, and I'll introduce him in just one moment. But I want to do a quick update of the coming launch manifests, which have moved around somewhat. What a surprise. And we will go from there. So when last we spoke, we were heading toward our next launch in October, which is called the Harmony Flight, which is an Earth Orbital Service mission. And that has now moved till February. I think we sent all the Harmony families a notice on this a few weeks back. We moved from Transporter 10 to Transporter 11. Just as a reminder, we fly always as a secondary payload, so we have no say other than where we're going as to launch dates. We keep very close to all of our providers and provide that information as it occurs. We'll talk about, I actually skipped the one that everybody is here to learn about today, which is our Enterprise Tranquility flight. And we'll get to that with some exciting updates about that mission. It's getting close. And we're all very excited about going back to the moon and going into deep space for our very first time. And that's what the balance of this show will be about. So that is queued up in harmony. Then the aptly named Perseverance Earthrise mission, flown out of Spaceport America. I say aptly because many of you know that we had gone about 15 years and multiple missions, at least a dozen missions, without a launch failure. But our Aurora flight did not make it fully into its suborbital trajectory. The great news about that is we completely recovered the payload, and as part of our contractual commitment to our clients, we will refly those capsules on Perseverance in the middle of 2024. We'll then segue to our Serenity Earth orbital mission out of Cape Canaveral, which is in about the same time frame, mid-2024, and then flow into our Destiny lunar third mission to the moon, which will be in 2025. We're lining up a whole series of additional missions. Our cadence is even surprising me these days, but all the missions are moving toward launch date for each one of our services. So, and if you have other questions, we will be happy to take those. But let me now turn to the main reason for today, which is our guest, Mr. Tory Bruno, who is the president and CEO of ULA, United Launch Alliance, and not insignificantly, the man that's going to put Gene Roddenberry, Majel Roddenberry, Jimmy Doohan, Michelle Nichols, DeForest Kelley, and many more of their friends on a trajectory into deepest space later this year. And oh, by the way, dropping off Sir Arthur Clarke and about 70 other folks on the surface of the moon via the Astrobotic Peregrine mission on the same one. So we're delighted. Tory is definitely a steely-eyed missile man, as they say. He came up doing the hard work of space science and rocketry. And now he presides over one of the most exciting and consistent companies that occupies the space zone. ULA gets it right, gets it flown, and I have to say is celebrating the anniversary of the Atlas V today. I saw that. So without further ado, I want to say thank you and welcome to Mr. Tory Bruno, who will be joining us from ULA headquarters. And Tory, great to have you with us.
Oh, Charles, it's wonderful to be here with you.
Thank you. All right. Well, I'm going to turn the drill over to you. The way it'll work from here, folks, is Tory's going to give us a presentation and an update on the Vulcan Centaur 5 mission, the Cert 1 mission that the world is waiting for and that we're getting so close for. He's going to give us an overview about that and also about ULA. And then he's agreed to sit around and talk rockets with you all and answer some questions that you may have. So, Tory, take it away. I guess, Mark, can you bring up the presentation?
All right. Well, thank you all for spending time with me today. As Charles said, I'm going to tell you a little bit about this mission and a little bit about the rocket that will fly it. I want to say that everyone here at ULA is very honored to be a part of your memorials going to space. And certainly for the balance of our time together, I want you to think of me as your personal rocket scientist. All right, go to the next slide, please. This is a little bit about ULA. We have flown 156 times. We have never once failed to take our mission to space. We touch your life every single day. We created the GPS architecture that we use to navigate. We have explored the universe. We have been to Mars 20 times. If you are watching the typhoon that is coming into the coast of California or have ever seen a satellite image for the weather, chances are we made that happen. So we're the quiet company that some of you may not have heard of, but we are a part of your life. Go to the next slide, please. This is just a little bit about us physically. This is your gateway to space on this mission. We have the largest rocket factory in the world at over 2 million square feet. We operate from pads on both coasts of the United States at Cape Canaveral and out in California on Vandenberg Space Force Base. And of course, we have our mighty but small navy of one custom-built rocket ship that transports our rockets from the rocket factory in Decatur, Alabama to either of those two locations. And we fly all of the most critical missions. The weather we talked about, the national security for the U.S. and its allies, exploration. There's an image from the flyby of Pluto, launched by our mighty Atlas rocket, and of course now a part of the Celestis family. Next slide, please. We have a pretty rich history with NASA. I talked a little bit about some of that, planetary exploration, been to Mars 20 times. We have certainly currently placed most of the constellation and the satellites that predict weather, but also monitor the climate of our planet and to help us better understand our own home as well as our place in the universe. The other thing that is special about us are those little circles along the bottom of the page. Each of those are a bullseye. I put these out to the public every time we fly. And what they represent is how accurately we inserted our spacecraft to our customers' needs. So that outer darker gray ring would be the 100% of the spec that they gave us, where they said, hey, anywhere inside that circle, all the way out to the edge will be just fine, and the spacecraft will achieve its mission. If you have a good screen, you can see a tiny little set of dots in the very center, each dot for an orbital parameter that was important to them, and they're all in the center. So they're all bullseyes. So you will be expecting to receive what we have given every other customer, which is the world's most accurate orbital insertions. Go to the next slide, please. All right, so how about the new rocket? We are just finishing up development of this Vulcan Centaur, which will be your vehicle. Go to the next slide, please. These are some pictures of it as it's finishing up qualification. If you go to the top left, that's the aft loading bay of the rocket ship, our vessel that conveys it from Alabama down to Cape Canaveral or through the Panama Canal up to Vandenberg. What you're looking at on the left side of that photo is an Atlas booster. In the center is the so much larger Vulcan booster. And then, of course, on the far right is Centaur 3 for Atlas. On its way down to the pad in the lower right, that's that actual booster that we use to verify that we could get our super cold cryogenic propellants onto the rocket and off, and certify all of the complicated systems that are used on the ground to operate that. Above it, that's the final qualification test of our solid rocket motor. We can have anywhere from 0 to 6 of these SRMs on the side of the booster for more power at liftoff, more thrust. These in themselves are an engineering marvel. The rocket you are flying on will have boosters that are the longest single segment solid rocket motors ever built and operationally used. Lower left, that's the first stage's BE4 liquid rocket engine and its qualification test. These are all now qualified components. Go to the next slide. And then we topped all of that off with the booster, less its upper stage, which I'll talk about in a moment, doing a flight readiness firing where we literally bolt the booster to the launch pad, fully fuel it, and then light the rocket engines and run them up to about 65% power while we hold the rocket down, which means they were doing over 600,000 to 700,000 pounds of thrust when that was going on. So the entire rocket system is now certified, save one last test for the structure of the upper stage, which is being prepared for right now. Go to the next slide, please. So speaking of the upper stage, this diagram sort of compares the Centaur 3 that we fly now in Atlas, which is the highest performance upper stage ever built and flown, to the Centaur 5, which you will be attached to for the Enterprise mission, in which we'll also be delivering Astrobotic's Peregrine lunar lander with the Tranquility mission on it as well. This is, as I said, very high performance. It's specifically designed for the type of rocket a Vulcan is, which is something we call a high energy rocket that is designed and architected for very complex missions that usually finish in Earth orbit, but of course can obviously go interplanetary as well. It is a paper-thin stainless steel tank, in fact, so thin that it cannot support its own weight unless it's pressurized, and so we keep it that way at all times unless it's supported by tooling. At some point in your life, you have held probably a wedding invitation in your hand that is thicker than this 40-foot long stainless steel tank. It is able to operate for many, many hours on orbit. That's part of that high energy architecture. So a typical mission of that nature would have this stage operating for 7 or 8 hours. Your mission will be shorter than that, and we'll cover that pretty soon. So that's about 10 times the endurance of any other stage that you would see flying in the world. And of course, when we move from Centaur 3 to Centaur 5, we're going to the next level. So it's almost 3 times as much energy, the same length, but much larger in diameter, 5.4 meters, and that same very, very thin pressure stabilized type of technology. Over on the right of this, you can see a dome on the bottom being fabricated by, our robotic equipment in the factory. And then up above that, you just see the bottom side of the dome. Go to the next slide, please. This is to give you a feel for the scale of the whole thing. This was the first one we built. The ribs that you see on the barrel section are not part of the stage. That's tooling again to help it keep its shape until it's been pressurized and fueled. And on the left, that's the forward side of the stage. There will be a structure attached there that we attach Peregrine to, and on that structure will be the Celestis Memorial as well. Go to the next slide. All right, let's talk about the mission for a second. One more slide, please. All right, so this is the mission. For this particular configuration, you'll be sitting on top of this 30-story tall rocket. It will have 2 solids attached, and all of that together means that we have over 1 million pounds of thrust coming out of that cryogenic liquid core, as well as well over 300 pounds of thrust from each of those 2 solids, lifting us off the pad. So it'll come off pretty promptly. About 2 minutes into flight, all 130,000 pounds of propellant from each of those solids will be burned, and they'll eject. 4.5 minutes into flight, the center core will be emptied of its many hundred thousands of gallons of propellant, almost 1 million pounds of propellant. And then we'll continue on with our upper stage with the amazing Centaur 5 that we talked about a moment ago. Depending on which phase of the moon we're launching in, so in other words, depending on which day of the month, your mission will take between 30 and 90 minutes before we separate the payload and then put the Centaur for the Enterprise mission on its final trajectory while Peregrine continues on to the moon. That'll be on a trajectory that we call a translunar injection, which is a path that would take Peregrine out essentially in front of the moon. So when it gets to its targeted point in space, the moon will have gotten there too, and its gravitation will capture Peregrine and allow us to orbit and then land on the surface. So it'll be a very exciting 90 minutes, followed by about a week of transit, depending again on which day in the month we launch, before Peregrine is down on the surface. And go to the next slide. And again, depending on that, this is the ultimate orbits that the Centaur with the Enterprise mission would end up residing in. And so if we start in the center, say a full moon, you can see that we'll be orbiting sort of in that inner solar system tour, we call it, where we're sort of in between Earth and Venus as we're on that slightly elliptical orbit. If we're over on the left, closer to the waxing quarter, you can see that very wide, the red line. Hopefully you can make that out on your screen. That is your orbit where we're getting way out beyond Mars, far beyond Mars, and then swinging in closer to the Earth each time. If we're on the opposite cycle of the lunar cycle with the waning quarter, it'll be cycling through Venus and out to the Earth and back. But really, you're in what we call a heliocentric orbit. You're orbiting the sun at these very great distances. All of these are stable orbits. And of course, you saw Centaur. That's built primarily from stainless steel. That's a very special alloy of stainless steel, in fact, that has even stronger and more flexible properties at these incredibly cold temperatures. Our liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, that's our propellant, the most energetic chemical propellants in practical use today, but very, very cold, minus 423 degrees Fahrenheit for that liquid hydrogen, for example. So that's why we use stainless steel, but it also means that this stage will stay intact for hundreds of thousands of years in this orbit. There's no soft goods here that we build these tanks from. So things like fabrics and rubbers and plastics deteriorate very, very quickly in the harsh radiation environment of outer space, but that's not the case here. So in fact, your memorials will last far longer than any terrestrial, or one might say earthly memorial, literally, practically till the end of time, at least for our solar system. Go to the next slide, please. And with that, I'm out of slides and available for any questions anyone might have.
Thank you. That's so cool, the last part. And I wanted to add, for those of you who are flying DNA with us on Enterprise, we've also built the capsules out of the titanium that NASA uses to protect the electronics on its deep space missions. So we're getting multiple radiation coverage there for your DNA. And we're just so excited about this mission, and the world is as well. And it's not just because of the Star Trek icons or former astronauts. It really is, it's going to be the furthest outpost of humanity ever. So in addition to our memorial capsules, your memorial capsules, and your DNA capsules, and what we call mind files, you have what is an outpost of humanity that will last, again, literally, practically forever. And this is the first time we've done that. We've been to the moon before, but this is the first time we've ever been able to do this Voyager mission. And I've told this story before. I will tell it again and then get to your questions, that this mission is really, and thanks so much to everyone at ULA for making it possible. This is the culmination of a personal promise I made to Major Roddenberry in 1997, when she had agreed to allow me to fly her husband on our first mission, the Founders Flight, along with Timothy Leary and 22 other souls. She said, Charlie, that's fine, but you have to make me a deal. Whenever it's possible to get into deep space, I want you to promise that you'll fly Gene and I together on that mission. And I've been carrying that IOU since 1997. So you guys are going to be able to help me cash out and fulfill my promise. And I'm pretty sure that their son, Rod, will be there with us. And it'll be a great day for all of us there in the Cape at liftoff. And it's because of ULA. And one more ULA story before. I had the privilege of being toured into that amazing rocket factory there in Decatur, Alabama. And I was taking the tour, and I had some great hosts from ULA with me, and we were looking at the mock-up of the carrier and talking about it, and I saw this not a young spring chicken, someone who'd obviously been working the factory floor for many years at ULA, and he kind of shyly was walking up to me, and I looked up. Hello. I just want to shake your hand. We're so honored and pleased to be able to be hosting this flight. And I said, you're welcome. We're pleased that you're hosting us. But it was just such a heartfelt sense of your team and their dedication. And I'm sure that extends to all of your customers. But I really felt it there on the factory floor. And we're just really excited. Okay, time for questions. Mark, did you have something? Yeah. But you're on mute, so we can't hear you.
Thank you. I am muted myself. I refuse to call you Tory at this point. I am definitely going to call you Mr. Bruno. I'm still shaking. You guys are on a different level than I am. Speaking for the families and friends of families and so on, being on this level where our feet are firmly planted on the ground, you guys are in a different atmosphere than we're in right now. This was totally unbelievably awesome. I have never seen a presentation such as this presented to our families, other than the updates that Charlie gives us all the time in terms of being in reality. Right now, we're literally looking at our Uber driver and just being blown away by everything that you have shown us, where the families are going, where our DNA is going, bit by bit, step by step, piece by piece. And I thank you, sir. Thank you so much for sharing this much information. It only brings our excitement up 10 more fold, in my opinion. I'm going to keep your slideshow in play here. So if you ever wanted to go back to any specific slide that you've already shown us, I am able to do so. But the boards are lighting up with questions here, and I have no idea what to start with. Charlie, you want to help me on this one, sir?
Yeah, let me, and we'll try to segment these into the practical and the theoretical. And in any event, I think the first question everybody wants to know, when is Vulcan Centaur going to fly? What's your best current read?
We're looking at the fourth quarter of this year, so before the end of the year. We're building the Centaur right now that goes on top of the rocket. It looks like the picture I just showed you, so it is complete and off to go. We insulate it to have insulation put on it, and have the engines attached. So we're feeling pretty good.
That's amazing.
That's great news.
Before the end of the quarter. Wow. Or end of the
so
year.
So all of y'all plan on spending your holidays at the Cape, and the beach is great that time of
year.
Yeah.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time.
Yeah, exactly. Well, as you know, we host families for that launch. And I guess I'm expecting nearly 1,000 guests to come and help you push it off the platform there when we fly. Gene Kozicki had a good question here, which is, what are the milestones involved in hitting that date?
Oh, sure. Well, it's really all about that upper stage. The booster is built. It's at the Cape. As I mentioned, we fired up the engine. It's ready to go. So what we need to get done now to get there is to finish fabricating the upper stage. And we have a test we're going to run on a different upper stage to qualify one last piece of the structure. So those are sort of the two big things that need to happen between now and fourth quarter. And by the way, that other stage that we're going to use to run that test on, that's also built, and it is being instrumented right now, and then will be moved down to the Marshall Space Flight Center, also there in Alabama in Huntsville, where we'll conduct that test.
That's great. Well, people have heard me quote my decade-long boss, Deke Slayton, which is that no one gives out any awards for an on-time failure. So we know that you'll take all the requisite steps to safeguard our precious payload, your precious rocket, and Astrobotic's amazing, groundbreaking lunar lander. So it's an exciting mission, and we know that, that's what ULA exemplifies, which is that commitment to success. And there's nothing like you visit some of your buildings and you just see all those launches lined up that have succeeded, and you know that there's a reason why that happens, and it's your team and the care that your team makes certain you're not driving to a specific date, you're driving to a specific bullseye, as you said. And I believe that all of our customers at this point not only understand, but they embrace the care that you guys put into what you do.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, Charlie. We really do focus on these missions. We love rockets, obviously, we're rocket people, but our rocket has no purpose outside the mission it's lifting. And we think of our customers' missions as our mission. And, we know that certainly in your case, people have memorials and, loved ones and personal inspiration in the form of DNA and whatnot on that mission. It's very important to them. We're accustomed to flying missions for NASA where this is the culmination often of a scientist's life's work. And there is rarely a second shot at something like that. In fact, I try and tell people that I don't have favorites, but I do have one favorite so far, and that was the Parker Solar Probe that is now orbiting the sun. It's the closest man-made object ever to the sun. It literally flies through the sun's atmosphere. It is the fastest moving human object in the universe. But what it made it special for me is that it was named after Dr. Parker, the only NASA mission named for a living person at the time who was a rebel. He is the guy who said, space is not empty. It's full of solar wind and material. And people called him a madman at the time, and he was criticized. But that 90-year-old scientist who was proved right, his mission was on that pad, and I could stand there with him and let him touch his rocket. That's how we think of these missions, and we think of your mission in much the same way.
Thank you. A couple of questions came up about trajectory of this mission, and I'm going to group them. The first one is essentially ask Leslie, is there another takeoff from the moon, or is it just part of the rocket landing on the moon? So that would be, once we reach the moon, describe how you send Astrobotic and then how you send Centaur on its way.
Right. So a mission like this, from the standpoint of the rocket, is really completed in Earth orbit. So the booster will go on up. When it's burned out, it'll be just shy of orbital velocity. And so it will fall back into the ocean. We typically drop them far, far out to sea where it's safe. Then the upper stage will get lined up with our desired trajectory. In this case, it's, as I said, a translunar injection or a TLI. We will light up that upper stage and we'll burn it and put the peregrine on a path that will carry it out to the moon. All of that being over in, like I said, about 30 to 90 minutes, depending on the day we launch. Peregrine will continue on its own for about another week, again, depending on the day we launch, before it arrives at the moon, is captured into a lunar orbit, burns a little bit of its own energy to take that, what we call delta V, or that energy out, so that the moon's gravity can then draw it down to the surface. Meanwhile, way back a week earlier, after we let it go, we will have lined up our upper stage on its orbit, which I showed you on that slide, where the Enterprise mission will not separate and will retain. Centaur 5 will be its home, and then we'll give it one last burn and away she goes.
Excellent. And that burn, according to which quarter of the moon we are, will take us into one of those three deep space trajectories. Let me be clarified. On none of those trajectories are we leaving the solar system. We'll always be under the influence of the sun. We'll always be in one form or another solar orbiting. Our definition of deep space is beyond the Earth-Moon system, so we'll be way beyond the Earth-Moon system for that deep space mission, our first. A related question, and we got a bunch of them. You've obviously got a bunch of interested people here, and we'll do the lightning round toward the end. But this one I think is pretty good. A picture would be 1,000 words. I don't think we have that, but it was, could you please provide technical details about the placement and attachment of the Celestis capsules, such as where exactly will they be placed and how will they be attached?
Yeah, if we could go back to the slide that had a diagram of the two upper stages side by side, Centaur 3 and Centaur 5. Right there, very good. So above that, Centaur 5 is where the payload is going to reside. So you can see there's sort of a dome peeking out from that last barrel section. That barrel section is a forged ring. We're going to attach a piece of structure to that because the payload isn't going to rest directly on the dome. And so there's a conical shape above that then has what we call a dispenser the peregrine will be attached to and separate from. That conical structure that supports all of that has a machined surface in it that looks like little square pockets. And remember that on a rocket, everything that isn't payload or propellant we think of as wasteful, right? If it's not propellant, it's subtracting mass from what the payload can be. That's why we machine these little square pockets out. And when we are here on the first stage of a heavy launch vehicle like this, it's 1 for 1. So literally every piece of inert mass, every kilogram of inert mass costs you a kilogram of payload. So that's why we have this very, very high performance paper thin structure. In one of those little squares, your payload fits perfectly and is attached there. And so it is sitting on that structure that remains permanently attached to the top of the Centaur 5. And of course, peregrine will separate and travel onto the moon.
All right, great answer. And I've seen the mock-up of it, and it looks as cool as it sounds. And a great vessel for the loved ones who are on board, and with all the appropriate care and reverence. Again, I've noticed throughout the process. So your loved ones are in good hands, and your own DNA is in good hands. We had one person who asked whether the capsule will be intercepted by the aliens and create a whole new race of people. To that, I'll take that question, Tory, and the answer is we don't make no guarantees.
I cracked up on that one. I was hoping
clearly the spirit of human exploration and expansion into the universe is one that we support. Many scientists believe that life on Earth came from DNA that was spread throughout the solar system, the universe. But we just tell you where we're going to take it, and that's not as far as we can do that. And I think everyone else is aware of that. All right, one more technical question, and then we'll get into some philosophy, which is what are the advantages of a methane-powered rocket?
Oh, that's a great question. So one of the, we'll start with liquid propellants in general, and then I'll zero into methane. So one of the things we like about using liquid propellants in the core and in the upper stage is that we have the ability to throttle the rocket and to efficiently use its propellant by doing that, and to avoid significant stresses on the rocket at events like staging or separating the solids. That's different than a solid, which always gives you a fixed thrust profile. So that's why we use liquids to begin with. And in this case, we're using methane, which is in a way a more recent or novel propellant for rockets of this size, because in the past, people have struggled to use methane in large rocket engines and have those engines burn stably and consistently. We like methane because it's readily available. It's a purified form of liquid natural gas, so it's relatively inexpensive. There's lots of it available. It is still a hydrocarbon fuel, and so I would point out to folks who are participating in this that would be potentially concerned about environmental effects of rocketry, that the net effect of space launch and the things that we do with space is immensely positive relative to that sort of thing. GPS alone saves, almost 500 million gallons of fossil fuel pretty much on a daily basis, and just because of the improved precision of navigation and the improvements that GPS alone has provided to agriculture. Feed about 800,000 people a day. And so, yes, it's a hydrocarbon, but space is net positive with respect to hydrocarbon use on the planet. Methane is very energetic, it's affordable, and it's available. That's why we like it.
And it's a great point. I'm one of those space geeks that believes that the long-term preservation of the planet is inextricably linked to our space program and our expansion throughout the universe. And it's great when you come armed with, oh, by the way, here's all the fuel we're saving through what we're doing. I think that's there's a tendency to kind of think of, oh, we got to save the planet first before we can go to space. And my opinion, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, is that that's kind of backwards from what it is, which is the only way we're going to save the planet is if we have a robust human space program. But
I agree with you, certainly, Charlie. You're not putting words in my mouth, and I'll take it a step further for you, because one of the things we haven't talked about Centaur 5 is that as it evolves, its duration, its ability to operate for very long periods in space will continue to grow to the point that we have a practical through space transportation system, which means we can begin to develop the natural resources that exist there. Because, even with these net positive benefits here on Earth, we are still consuming finite, resources and struggling hard to, reduce our footprint so that we can extend the ultimate demise of our civilization when we finally consume them, hopefully far, far in the future. While all this time, a week away from where we are all sitting participating in this conversation, there are resources in such abundance that it defies human imagination. On the moon and on the near Earth objects, or asteroids as we commonly call them, within reach of the moon, that completely change our human destiny. These resources that are rare here on Earth are not rare in our solar system. And when we are able to go to space and practically tap into that resource, we change the destiny of our species. And you guys, in a way, are a part of that, as you were off with that first platform of the Centaur 5, orbiting the sun for hundreds of thousands of years.
And you're speaking the Lord's truth here, in my opinion. And I want to add one other element to that, which is traditionally, if you can avoid killing people and enslaving people, which I think space presents that opportunity. But what happens is oftentimes it's not the rich and wealthy people that benefit the most. It's the poorest of the poor that all of a sudden have access to resources affordably and in quantities that allow them to grow their economies and to grow their capabilities. And so, you cannot have infinite growth in a finite system. But once you, as someone I worked for very early on, Jerry O'Neill, once you open the door on the closed world, then exactly the kind of capabilities and futures are out there that nobody really is talking about today. We're doing a lot of talking, but we're not really, if you and I were sitting in a bar in Portugal in 1490, and I said, I know this guy that's getting ready to sail around the world, we would have been two people that knew that was going on out of the entire Western civilization at the time. So now, if we can start doing these, I think it's the doing of these things. And that's why I agree with you. Our launch certainly is a symbolic launch. We are not putting people out beyond Mars. But we're saying humanity is heading that way, and we're taking that first step. And I think that's an awful lot of the reasons why people find our service so compelling, is because we're just part of that human march into the cosmos. We'll come back. We have a few more minutes, but I got a couple more practicals that I want to throw at you, which is, where was that? Oh, Parker was amazing. I know that. It has to do, there's two of them. And one of them is, can you tell us the windows? If you can't tell us the launch date, can you tell us the windows within that fourth quarter period? And I think that's probably some math, and we're not going to require you to do that math here. But if you want to say anything, people are clamoring to come and see your rocket. They are saying, what are you going to show us? When is, can we make our launch reservations? Can we do it? And we constantly are telling people, we will tell you when we buy our tickets. That means we believe that launch date is going to occur, and we're asking you guys to do it then. I think the question I was looking for was, how much warning are we going to get? I think is they didn't quite put it that way, but how far out from actual launch are you going to be prepared? And I know you there are things you can say and things you can't say, and I don't want to put you on any spot, but can you give them they'll know at least a month in advance or whatever kind of,
yes.
And again, it's a projected launch date. It's a targeted launch date. But what can you tell us about that?
Well, you sort of said it. You'll certainly know a month out, but in fact, every week, our confidence grows, and it becomes more and more certain. So there'll be time to buy your tickets and get down there for sure. in terms of the original way they articulated the question, Charlie, it is, we talk about the days that we can launch and go there for Peregrine as a launch window. That's what we call it, a window. And you might think, well, the moon's always there. You can go any day you want. But there are constraints. And the two primary constraints are lighting conditions for the landing of Peregrine, because it's landing in a very specific location, as you well know. And then the other is that they need to communicate with the Earth. They need to get their telemetry back while they're doing all of that. And so there's a thing called the Deep Space Network, which might sound like it's a set of communication satellites in deep space. It's not. These are ground stations on Earth that talk to deep space. There's 3 of them. There's one in the US, one in Australia, one in Spain. And so they have specific windows when the reception is best for transmitters that are not incredibly powerful. And Peregrine is a small spacecraft, so it has a limit, if you will, to how strongly it can broadcast. So between the combination of having the right lighting conditions and being closer to the center of focus or center of the field of regard of that receiver on Earth, that creates these launch windows. And typically there is a launch window every month, and it might be only 2 days long, but I think it's quite a bit more common for them to be 4, 5, even 8 days long. So there'll be a week, sometimes a week and a half within every month that we can go to the moon.
Great, very helpful. Here's a question I'm wondering if you know the answer to. You may. How fast will the Enterprise space station be traveling through deep space?
Oh, that's a great question. So we've got a C3 of just a little bit more than 1, which is not helping you at all, because that's characteristic velocity. And it is a measure of what it takes to leave the gravitational influence of the Earth, at which point you're still, as you pointed out earlier, still under the gravitational influence of the sun. And I would want everyone to sort of grasp the concept that everything is in orbit all the time, even you and me. The actual velocity of this mission, I don't remember off the top of my head. I'm sorry, but we can get that one to you.
Appreciate that. So I'm going to do a quick lightning round. We're closing in with just a few minutes, and I want to talk big picture toward the end if we can. So lightning round, Mr. Bransfield, you can watch this presentation later. We'll be on our YouTube channel. Just go to the Celestis YouTube channel. It'll be up there, and you can see the whole thing. For the person that asked about Excelsior launch certificates, those have gone out. So if you didn't get yours, please send an email to cs1@celestis.com, and we'll get those right out to you. The third question is that I referred to Destiny as a 2025 mission, where it's shown on our website as a 2024 mission. I'm giving you a heads up, guys. Our official policy on the website is until we have a signed, sealed, and delivered statement from the provider, we only use the date the provider has provided. So what I'm telling you is expect that will move, and that as soon as we, NDAs and contracts on announcement and all those kind of things, we will officially update the website. But you heard it here first, and I'm the CEO, so I must be right, right? I know Tory shares that view. So thank you again so much for being with us today. There's so many big questions. The one I asked the staff and everybody one that came up that I never even thought about, and I'd be interested in hearing your view, was how do you see artificial intelligence playing a role in the future of rocket development, launch operations, and space missions?
Yeah. Well, I think it's really going to speed our ability to innovate. And that's sort of the bottom line. But let me talk about the journey to get there just for a moment. And maybe it would help to think of it not as AI, but as IA, as automating intellectual tasks. Okay. So kind of like what robotics has done for mechanical tasks or physical tasks, there are a lot of things that rocket scientists and planners and trajectory modelers do that are intellectual work, that are repetitive and complicated and in a way tedious, that still are being done by knowledge workers and smart people, and in fact rocket scientists, that could be done by AI, and take that burden off of the person who's calculating all these tedious calculations or sifting through reams of data looking for something that we could have an artificial intelligence algorithm go and do for them, so that they can focus on the decisions that humans make, or the high value judgments and choices that a human can make while having that done for them. And we are in fact embarked on a significant AI program here at ULA to basically find those tasks that we wish we could liberate our rocket scientists from first, and trust AI to do that. And when we do that, there's just that much more time to come up with more creative solutions, and to be more innovative, and to have even better, hopefully even better reliability and mission focus. Does that make sense?
Really? Yeah, absolutely. And what we would expect. Mark, you got to have a question that you've been dying to ask Mr. Bruno.
I've just been sitting in awe since this program started, and if you've ever seen me speechless before, I'm just in total awe. This is unbelievable. One of my greatest experiences in the space program was spending a little bit of time with Neil Armstrong. This ranks up in that same level, spending time with Mr. Bruno here. This is amazing. If I had to really ask a question about your rockets, and talking about the where I build houses and buildings and so on, you were explaining the outer skin of the rockets that you use. Is this the first time the skin has been this thin? Have you advanced your science so far from the 70s, 60s, 50s, whatever, that the weight of the rocket contributed to, let's say, the advancement of us moving further out into space?
Yes, to some degree. The Centaur 3 that we fly today is that same very thin stainless steel. But what modern engineering tools have allowed us to do on Centaur 5 is to really ramp that to a much, much larger scale, and to operate with thinner margins, if you will. So whenever you design a structure, you have the load you think it'll experience and the strength you expect it to have, and you design the thickness accordingly. But if you have better insight, better tools, then those things become more certain, and you can make it even thinner. And another great example is the booster itself, the first stage. We were talking about the upper stage. The booster is not an inflatable stainless steel structure. It's a rigid structure, but it isn't the skin and stringer airplane-like construction that we see in older rockets or some simpler rockets. It's a very carefully machined aluminum plate. And as we moved from our last generation of rocket to this one, that is even higher performance, again, because of our analytical tools have improved. You would be surprised, or I think maybe the average person might be surprised, how much the tool you have, the computer models you have to calculate things, influence the designs you actually come up with.
Interesting. Yep. Interesting. Well, that's all I need to ask for this evening of you, sir. I'm just looking forward to being there for this launch, and hopefully get to meet you in person and shake your hand, sir.
Looking forward to it, Mark.
Mark.
That's
okay.
Well, before we sign off, we've had one person ask multiple questions about Excelsior flight. I'd say two things. One is, please call us. We'll be happy to tell you everything about Excelsior, but let me summarize. Excelsior took off, achieved 10 orbits, Our contract says success is 1 orbit, but it fell short of our expectations in terms of on-orbit lifetime. Re-entered after those 10 orbits, again, completing all of our contracts. Some people said, hey, I want longer. It was less orbits than we wanted to be. So what we said is anyone that wants a free reflight on our next orbital mission, we got you, and we'll guarantee that that'll be a 3-year orbit for you. And most everybody that wanted to has taken advantage of that. If Rocket Lover hasn't been able to do that, just get in touch with us. We'll refly and make sure you get multiple orbits, because that is what we're about. All right. Again, Tory, I thank you so much. You guys, ULA has been a wonderful provider for Celestis, and I think we're really ready to watch you all knock it out of the park here in the 4th quarter. So thank you for your time today.
Well, thank you, Charlie. Mark, it was a pleasure speaking with you. And, as you said earlier, we are really honored to be entrusted with this mission. We think it's just the coolest thing.
Thank you.
This is incredible. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. For everyone else, if I may, excuse me for a sec. Once again, just as a constant reminder, and people are popping in and popping out watching the broadcast, you can watch this broadcast at your leisure, probably a couple minutes after it ends on YouTube. Facebook may be immediate, I'm not sure, but you can take that link and share it with your family. Make sure all your family members know all the information that has been shared here. This is not our last update. So many of you that may have questions about other flights, upcoming flights, and so on, this is not the end for us. We try to hold these as often as we possibly can. And not just us. You don't have to wait for these broadcasts. Our Celestis team is just incredible. They'll take your call. They'll answer your questions. So don't fret if there's a little discomfort in questions that we have not gotten to for this afternoon. Don't worry about it. We're here all the time for you. We will answer your questions. Not a problem whatsoever. This has been an incredible broadcast. We are so honored to have Mr. Tory Bruno, his entire staff there at ULA, United Launch Alliance. If you guys didn't hear it out loud, that's what ULA stands for. United Launch Alliance. Just keep your eyes open for a lot of flights that are happening soon, especially the Enterprise flight, which is no less important than the other flights that your loved ones may be on. Just wanted to point that out. So thank you guys so much for joining us. Keep your eyes open for our Facebook page for the next announced mission update. Since we are going on Enterprise, knock on wood, before the end of this year, there's going to be a lot of updates that's going to be coming hot and heavy, and plans for memorial services and so on that we normally do with our Celestis Memorial Spaceflight family. So thank you guys so much for joining us this afternoon, and we will be talking to you really soon.
In 2022, people from planet Earth will launch a spaceship bound to create a distant outpost of human civilization. A new island in deep space beyond Mars. Aboard the Enterprise flight will be biofiles, a complete genomic representation, DNA of crew members from around the world. Mind files, greetings and vital data from Earth's peoples. And memorial journeys, the precious remains of Star Trek's first family and others from all walks of life. Join the crew of the Enterprise flight yourself, or honor a life well lived with a memorial journey. Reservations are limited and may be secured through Celestis, the iconic global pioneer of memorial spaceflight.